Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Damn, Do You Approve? I'd like to start with some introductions first. Our hosts today, John Hordisky and Derek Torrey from Salt Flats, Andy McLeroy and RJ Bishop from Baptist Health, and my name is Eric Reichel from IntelligenceBank. John, tell us a little bit about Salt Flats.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Salt Flats, we are a bunch of creative disruptors who help manage good change for all our clients in all industries. But we are a diverse team of modern day problem solvers from a variety of backgrounds. We have a lot of experience in entrepreneurship, data, library sciences, design, manufacturing, strategy, communications, all those good things. But where our purpose is to discover, to create and launch new ways of thinking, working, and growing to create meaningful and lasting value, whether that's DAM, MarTech, metadata, taxonomy, governance, all those good things around your content and even more. Thanks, Eric.
Awesome. Thanks, John. And Andy, tell us a little bit about Baptist Health.
Sure. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Baptist Health is the largest health system in Kentucky, and we also serve parts of Indiana, Illinois, and Tennessee. We're coming up in a few years here on our 100th anniversary, so we've been around a long time. We've grown from a single location to now 9 hospitals and then multiple healthcare facilities, lots of doctors, providers, everything that you can think of in the world of healthcare. And then since the pandemic, we've really grown in digital health, what we call virtual care, obviously providing remote health services and telemedicine services. So,
awesome. Thank you, Andy. Perfect. And for anyone new to IntelligenceBank, we started in 2009, and our vision is to transform marketing operations by bridging the gap between efficiency and compliance. Our award-winning content governance platform includes 3 key components: the digital asset management or DAM software that helps organizations unleash the power of their content and digital assets while solving those governance issues that every organization faces. A brand hub, online brand hub portal to bring your brand to life with online brand guidelines and end-to-end brand management. And the third piece is a marketing operations platform to help streamline your campaigns, work faster, and stay compliant. We have more than 650,000 users globally, and we are marketers who make software for marketers. So with that, what we hope to cover in today's webinar is to share a little bit about what a DAM is and what approvals within a DAM means, so we all have sort of a common foundation to start from. Then we'll talk about how tracking changes works and how it helps, how to deal with multiple versions, how approvals can help when working with remote teams, how an approval system can help when dealing with multiple stakeholders and approvers, why an approval system is important when it comes to governance and compliance, and then we'll leave plenty of time at the end to open it up to question and answers. So to set the foundation for this webinar and make sure we're all on the same page, first understanding what a DAM is and providing a quick summary of how it works. A DAM is a software platform that allows organizations to store, search, approve, create, and tag their digital assets. Not only that, some DAMs allow users to make edits and changes to their assets within the DAM itself. Now, focusing on the approval side of a DAM, to properly set up approval systems that your team can collaborate easier, be more efficient, and do so with better governance. It does this by allowing assets to flow through a set of review stages that each organization can set up custom to their own needs, ensuring that nothing is off-brand and non-compliant, and nothing leaves the organization without proper approval. This is crucial in many industries that have strict standards and regulations. We're going to ask a quick poll question here to understand how your organization handles digital asset approvals. And you should start to see a question here pop up on your screen. So how does your organization handle the approval of digital assets today? All right, looks like a majority of you have an approval process that you handle with some type of online platform. But there's also a good chunk that handle it through email, and a pretty big section of you still are doing it without an approval process at all, but definitely see that you need one. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. That helps us sort of set the stage for the conversation that we're going to now go into. So an approval system is important for an organization to get things out the door while producing quality content that stays on brand, and in many cases needs to be approved by your legal department. We at Intelligence Bank deal with a lot of customers in heavily regulated industries. So a lot of our clients have to have an approval solution that ties in all three things. First step is to make sure that their design language and copywriting is vetted and approved. Second is protecting your brand, which is so vitally important, as your brand is how the world sees you. And finally, legal gets involved and makes sure that your assets and campaigns are good to go. So getting into our first benefit of an approval system, I wanted to get everyone's experience with the ability to track changes with an asset or project as it's going through an approval system. So we'll start and throw it over to Salt Flats first. John and Derek, tell us a little bit about how Salt Flats helps your clients with regards to tracking systems for assets and campaigns.
Hey, thanks, Eric. It's a good question, and it may sound simple, but it really depends on the client's situation. So you have to take into account the market that the client's in. So a pharma client, for example, heavily regulated industry. And so when you think about a campaign and all of the elements that go into that campaign, copy, visual assets, how those two come together to documents, and how those documents relate to an overall campaign that may even have localization aspects to it, right? So you've got a centralized, and then you've got local markets. For pharma, it's audits, right? So it's auditing that entire process so that you can back up and see just where in the process someone approved a change to copy and on what date. So for pharma, right, it's going to be very audit heavy. Another example would be CPG. Take it, for example, somebody that's managing a packaging approval process in the food markets. Their copy is going to be very important because if an ingredient or nutritional piece of information changes, it's not as heavily regulated as pharma, but boy, it's really important, right? You can't get an ingredient or a calorie wrong. So managing copy becomes really important. And then another example would be e-commerce. And we realize today, how much e-commerce has grown. And we worked with a client previously where the speed of content getting online was so important that they couldn't take the time to approve all assets. They had a very selective, we're going to look randomly at assets to approve them. And so I really think it sounds simple, but understanding the market and the business needs helps you know where to get in and specifically what you have to track.
That's great. Thanks, Derek. Really appreciate that. It's a great insight. Andy, tell us a little bit about how Baptist Health deals with tracking changes on assets. Andy, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was it's freezing up a little here. Can you guys hear me okay and streaming okay? All right,
yep.
Great. Yeah, tracking changes is obviously really important to us in the healthcare industry. You mentioned regulated industries, and healthcare is, of course, very regulated. We have a really small, nimble team, and we have upwards of 1,400 projects a year. So we've got 2 designers on staff. We've got an extra design studio on retainer, and then we have same situation with copywriters, 2 on staff and some on contract. And so, tracking changes enables us to make sure it's reviewed from a design perspective, a copywriting perspective. We can also loop in subject matter expertise. The individual who's requesting the information can be brought in on the workflow to double check content. And then tracking changes also really helps with accountability. And it's not really just, if something goes wrong, then whose fault was it? But it's more looking back and seeing, through every stage, if we miss something or if we need to improve on something, we can see exactly where that happened or exactly where there may have been, a hole in communication, and make sure we have a solution for the next time. And sometimes, something will come out and someone, may have a question or concern about it, but there was a special exception or approval by leadership, and all that is documented in the various versions and tracking changes. Helps us to see, helps us to capture that and keep a record of that. So it's very valuable.
Thanks for that, Andy. I think from our experience talking to customers, that ability to track changes really transforms the way their teams work together to review the content. And our compare feature allows teams to track those changes and have a clear sort of visual comparison tool, and audit history really helps them deliver that high quality content and speed that delivery up, especially when there's multiple cooks in the kitchen and the reviews and the making of changes has to go through a lot of different hands. So one issue that I think plagues all organizations is the challenge of handling multiple versions of an asset. And the typical way of dealing with this is to keep the namings of the versions with sequential numbers. And you sort of hope the individual goes back and checks that they have the most recent version. But as we've all experienced, sharing multiple versions ends up with team members working off of outdated versions, and outdated versions being passed around and stored locally on their machines. So Derek or John, can you share a little bit about the advice that you give your clients with that sort of ever-changing problem of handling multiple versions of an asset?
Yeah, you mentioned multiple cooks in the kitchen. There's also multiple pieces of food being produced in that kitchen all at the same time. And version control, it's always an issue for assets in your DAM, and especially in a work in progress type of DAM where assets are being run through the approval process from inception to creation, all the edits, the completion, all the way through distribution. One way that we always see here at Salt Flats in which to help this is with the use of a great naming convention. Now, the file name, that's intended to describe the primary aboutness of the file, and that could include such great information as the date, the subject prefix, the product ID, the SKU, and even location or even gender, depending upon the requirements from the business unit and for the file creators. A good naming convention will greatly help you track your files within your business unit and with the others using collaborative work methods involving a variety of software applications. If the guidelines are being followed, a good file naming convention will help you track different versions of a file and determine which is the most current. You will need that for many good reasons. Derek, what do you think? That's a good thing. Right?
And yeah, that's excellent. And another thing is how the DAM system, in this case, IntelligenceBank, helps the users in that process, right? Because what we want to do is we want to make this seamless to the users. I'm working, I'm moving forward along a process. You want the system to help out. So occasionally, can the system create a version and store it away for the user automatically? No steps taken, right? And then how does the system, like IntelligenceBank, manage permissions so that, to Andrew's point, only the right person in the workflow can reach back and promote an older version up to current, so that it doesn't get stepped on. So, you want good process and people doing work, but you also want that DAM system like IntelligenceBank to make it easy, right? So it's working for the user.
Yeah, I was, do you mind if I jump in?
Go for it.
I was just thinking before we used the DAM, I remember like we'd have a file, say community report, and we'd have community report PDF 1, 2, saved on the hard drive, 3, because inevitably, as soon as you go to replace that, your leadership comes to you and says, well, could we go back to that version where you had the, and if you saved over it, so you've got all this, you've got these file folders, with all these multiple versions trying to keep track of. And if you don't keep track of them, then you're out of luck when you do need to go back and reference those older versions. So just find this so valuable to go in there, and it's an easy click just to go back to any previous version and, like you said, and restore it, if you need to go use it as the current. So.
Yeah, my favorite is the final version name.
Yeah, right. Yeah, when you label it final, it's final 2, final.
Oh no, really, this is the final. Yeah. So
we've seen situations where people actually, there could be a legal situation and they don't know which one was the final one that went to error, that went to sales, that actually went out the door. So joke, no joke, be very mindful of the file naming conventions. And if it is final, make sure it is final. And what other naming convention you want to use, just make sure you have the authority to call it a final version.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this challenge is one best solved with technology. Our customers utilize, our DAM to ensure that the correct version is the one that's being used and shared amongst their team, and that each version goes through the proper review process and fully gets approved. So, the particular issue that, handling things through email makes that really, really challenging. And being able to have a platform that not only can store the digital assets, but it can also handle multiple versions as a sort of core part of their functionality, I think is really an important piece of the puzzle. So the next benefit and obstacle is that's more prevalent than ever is how common remote teams are. Right, with companies adopting work from home or a hybrid work strategy, or just the global nature of a lot of marketing teams these days, it's not uncommon for members of the same team to never work in the same location. So this causes challenges and issues if there's no procedure in place to review and deal with these assets in a remote manner. So from a Salt Flats perspective, since you deal with companies of all shapes and sizes, how do you see your clients deal with the remoteness of work today?
Yeah, well, we're very excited by the realization that both virtual and remote work and its reliance on good collaboration, it's a reality for DAM in 2022. I mean, the pandemic has taught us that we are remote, but that we're able to be remote with others. And this goes beyond the memes or quips about using Zoom or Teams or Hangout meetings. This is all about consciously working differently and using technology to help us do so. And we believe that DAM has always been there. DAM has always done a tremendous job at this because it's all about the access to that content and being able to deliver that content at the right time to the right people with the greatest of ease. And it's really good to see that DAM has been the leader in this sort of online collaborative virtual work world that we're all embracing. So we always believe at Salt Flats that DAM, when configured well with smart, good metadata and efficient and effective workflows and being managed by good governance, DAM truly can be that sort of power tool of change for an organization. And the in-person opportunities, while they may not be available as much as before, are now being highlighted by that effective DAM setup to provide that central source of truth for the businesses and made accessible by anyone, anytime and anywhere. So make sure you've got that sort of good data foundation to help you in that remote space. And we believe that's a really good, powerful way to be in 2022 and beyond.
And if I might just add briefly to that, to Andrew's point, when you're managing a lot of different processes, remote, in person, and the combination we have today, the thing that the DAM allows you to do is to look backwards and say, okay, this type of campaign or working with this remote agency or these types of products or projects are constantly causing us trouble, multiple rounds, right? For some reason, we can always do 2 rounds with this type of work, but over here, we always do 5 rounds. So being able, not only does the tool help you get it done, but looking backwards on it, you can say, how do I need to improve my process? So again, DAM is at the forefront of this, and I think it's fantastic. It can really add a lot of value.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I'm so happy that we had the DAM in place when the pandemic hit and COVID. We went instantly, being in healthcare, instantly we went remote. One day we're at the office, the next day we're remote. And it was having this in place enabled us to hardly miss a beat. And I think about some of the other departments that was brand new to them, having to work remotely. But for us, we had some remote staff members and we're used to, collaborating through the DAM. And then another part is, about the multiple versions of that during the early parts of COVID, and even with other things too, but that's just fresh on the mind, obviously with what we've gone through. We'd have regulations changing daily sometimes, or at least, we would have signage or things that need to be posted right away, that were with guidance from, the CDC or the governing bodies. And then, the next week it would change. And so like keeping up with all those, making sure we had the most recent versions, making sure it all matched, regulations and all that, while at the same time working remotely. And during that time too, we brought on additional contractors. So we have one in Atlanta, we have one in Indianapolis, we're based in Louisville. We have team members, who, had to travel for various things, and then they could plug in wherever they were. And, we're all on the same page there. So just, very, very happy that when the time came to become full-time remote, that this tool was in place. So.
Yeah, I mean, from an intelligence bank perspective, I think that the pandemic caused many of our customers to leverage technology more than they previously had before, and the lucky ones that already had it in place, similar to you, Andy, we're able just to really lean on it and leverage it even more. And the folks that hadn't yet put anything in place, I think they had a much rougher transition as they moved to working remote.
Well, and I don't think that's going away. I think hybrid work and remote work is here to stay. It's a new trend. Like I know, that's an expectation now. That's a recruiting. I mean, I'm not sure everyone on this webinar obviously would go to that, but I don't think it's a fluke, and at least it wasn't for our industry and our team. So,
absolutely. All right, so let's move on to the fourth benefit. So, depending on the industry, there's a multitude of individuals and teams that are a part of a single campaign or creation of a single asset. And having these teams and stakeholders be able to work together easily and effectively is crucial to keeping the project flowing without getting bogged down in process and handoffs. So from a Salt Flats perspective, John and Derek, with the companies that you work with, what solutions do you recommend for dealing with the sort of multiple stakeholder world that we all live in?
Yeah, I think in my entire career, I've never been in a situation where it's just been one stakeholder. There's always multiple stakeholders, and sometimes in different regions and sometimes in different time zones. So absolutely, all of our clients, and I would expect many, if not all of the listeners on this webinar today, have situations with multiple stakeholders to consider when they're trying to do their work. The value of maintaining reoccurring communications with those stakeholders cannot be overstated. Schedule regular meetings to hear direct, unfiltered insights and get feedback from other user groups. But these also often sort of result in innovation and the development of new business development opportunities for the system itself. And this is all part of the goodness of governance. I know we've said this before, but we do believe in the value of good governance. This is the process that holds your organizational data's operations together as you truly seek to become data-driven and to realize the full potential of your data and content to avoid those missteps. So we like to think at Salt Flats, with governance and a good data foundation, you can be able to acknowledge those multiple stakeholders. I think, but Derek, what else can you do?
And I'll go back to tech again. I guess that's my piece here. Back to a system like Intelligence Bank needs to be able to offer, multiple ways to support these stakeholders, right? So you've got predefined workflows. We're doing this type of campaign, and I know here's the steps, here's the people involved, step A, step B. Some are parallel, some are in serial. Off we go. Well, you need to be able to support that, and you need to be able to support ad hoc, because occasionally you've got a creative art director in Vancouver and a writer in Florida, and they just have to work now quickly. So one thing is being able to support both models, ad hoc and predefined. And I know Intelligence Bank does that. And another thing that the system needs to be able to do is help users. So the workflow is going along, and Carol needs to review this copy for legal, but guess what? Carol's out. So the system needs to be able to react and say, okay, if Carol's out, what work group is she a part of? Do I move this task into a work group so someone else can take it? Do I alert the person that's administrating this workflow? And so again, the tech has got to be able to help here in both being flexible from the types of workflows and kind of doing some automation to help people so that you don't have some maestro that has to look in every day and say, is everybody getting their work done? You want the system to be able to do that for you. I'm sure Andrew has experience with that too.
Oh yeah, and everyone reviewing it brings a different perspective and a different expertise, and which I mentioned a little bit before. But one interesting thing, say you have a digital piece on there, the copywriter looks at it, looks great. Our designer, yes, that's brand standards. Well, and before, okay, it's good to go. Our copywriter, our designer looked at it, but now there's other considerations. Like one of our digital engagement team members, mentioned to me with accessibility. So that thing that we signed off on, where the color looked great and the copy looked great, well, it didn't, wasn't enhanced for disability or accessibility, on the website. So that's a different perspective than we had. Or like you mentioned, the different content areas. So someone obviously looking from human resources or legal or compliance is going to have that perspective on the content. So This is just, again, it's just invaluable to get everyone's different perspective to make sure that the final product is as good as it can be, and streamlined, together. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's common for some work to require multiple approvals, which can create those workflow challenges. You guys mentioned designers and copywriters and external agencies and the product expert and the brand team and legal and compliance. So those multiple approvers create a whole host of different challenges for different workflow approvals, depending on the type of work. So having a system that allows you to differentiate between those different types of assets and what approvals that they need to go through, I think is a pretty powerful piece of the equation. So some work may only require one level of approval, others might require 3 or 4. And what happens at the end of the line when someone asks for a change? Does it have to go all the way back to be re-reviewed by everyone? And sometimes that depends on what the change is that's being asked for. So, organizations have that challenge of how to best set up their approval workflows so that they're efficient and compliant and can take all these different complexities into account.
I'll throw a quick tip out there. I know we're short on time, but for us, like once the expert has reviewed it and they're good from their perspective, they say this is, approved from a copywriter perspective, that they don't need to see it again. And so then the designer loading it for the next round can go ahead and take them off, and you can get successively smaller approvers each time, so they don't have to see every version. Or I might say this is approved from a design perspective, but it still goes through a few more rounds of copywriting. So.
Yeah, that's great. So the last benefit we're going to discuss today is the benefit of having a tool that supports that governance and compliance requirement. So John and Derek, from a Salt Flats perspective, when it comes to a dam solution, I'd imagine one of the main features your client's looking for is that compliance tie-in. So what sort of solutions or advice do you share with your clients on this?
Absolutely. One thing that we always like to bring to all our clients when we begin any of our projects or programs with them is the philosophy and the realization that whatever you do with your dam or whatever you're trying to get done, it always has to involve technology, it has to involve people, process, and the data to make the entire thing work together. And one role that we have seen work really well in some of our clients is that of what is known as a content steward, someone who's responsible for utilizing the governance processes to ensure the sort of the fitness of the content and metadata throughout the process. This is a specialist role that kind of incorporates good process, policies, guidelines, and responsibilities for administrating those, so the data and compliance with those obligations. And the whole point is to get data quality, integrity, and without, throughout the beginning all the way to the end of the process. So we like that philosophy, and we've seen that content stewards is just one example of where we've seen good success, but there are other things to consider.
Yeah, two key principles we look at Salt Flats as we're approaching governance and compliance: just enough and non-invasive, right? So just enough sounds kind of simple, and it is, right? You can overdo your governance framework, you can overdo your approval workflow, just as Andrew was just mentioning how his approval workflow in an example can get simpler as it goes. Right? That's the concept of just enough. Put in just enough controls to meet your objectives. And we follow that wherever we can. And then the non-invasive piece is really, John mentioned the title of steward, right? And non-invasive goes back to something that Robert Seiner, S-E-I-N-E-R, wrote about back in 2014. And it's had good traction along the way. And it's really how you look at your organization. And when you look at your organization and you can identify resources that are already have a relationship with data, they have a relationship with a step in a process, they have a relationship with authority based on their role, those are the resources that you reach out to and make part of your governance framework. And you reach out to them and you invite them into the process rather than doing some type of top down. So just enough and non-invasive are two approaches that we take with governance.
Yeah, I like the word steward that John mentioned too. We have what we call gatekeeper, sort of system. So obviously everyone can't be on there approving. So, we have different levels of permissions, and then we designate certain users as appropriate, and for the rest, we have trained, our team is trained with gatekeeping, making sure that things are moving along, and also that the proper leaders and stakeholders are being looped in and having a chance to review as well. So,
I think from the Intelligence Bank perspective, when dealing with our customers, we definitely see a need for a process that includes that robust governance and compliance. Since most of our customers are in regulated industries, it's not a want to have, it's a must have capability. And to make sure that things don't leave out the door without being approved by compliance and legal for most of our customers is a really big deal. Having the ability to go back and actually do an audit and look back and be able to see that approval history and the tracking of all the requests on a particular asset, and that the proper procedure and protocol was actually followed, and being able to prove it, again, going back to John's comment with data, right? Being able to show in black and white that the proper processes were followed. I really like this sort of pretty simple image, but it sort of lays out 4 different types of approval workflows. And we see the best success when organizations sort of map out their workflows and set up their design based on that map. It's completely unique and dependent on each organization's own needs. So sometimes all you need is a creative workflow feedback loop, right? It's not really an approval that you need. You just need this creative workflow feedback loop. And you can set those type of things up, and they're perfect for those situations, so that the creative work can be tested, commented on, collaboration can be better and more quickly done. The next one is what we call a simple approval, right? That's basically submitting an asset for a final approval, and it just goes to one person, right? It's going into that one person's queue, and you only need their approval. Pretty simple and pretty easy. Unfortunately, that's not what most of the workflows that we all have to deal with are, but when they are, they're perfect and they're nice. The multi-step approval process is very common, and this is what we see the most, right? It involves approval sort of going up a chain or to multiple departments. And what's interesting here is that the logic can change for the different requests and how far they have to go up and back down that approval process, depending on where they got. Sort of going back to what Andy said earlier about, being able to check off certain approvals, and then on subsequent rounds of feedback, not having to go back to those people if those components weren't touched. And then finally, you have this concept of conditional approvals. And this is where, the level or order of approval depends on a certain piece of criteria. Maybe what type of campaign is this, or what is the cost of this campaign? Maybe that requires a certain, a different approval track. So, a few tips here are, when you know your workflow, it's possible to start making templates and make those repeatable within a system. With that, I think we're wrapped up with the presentation piece of this. We'd like to open up to Q&A. So for the attendees that are on the webinar, there should be a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen that you can click and submit a question to us. I guess, I'll start with Baptist Health. Can you guys tell us a little bit about, what those other groups and departments are within your organization that, get involved in the delivery of your content?
Sure. Yeah. Well, in our marketing department is sort of subdivided. So even within itself, so we have public relations within marketing. We have digital engagement, which is our web, social media team. And we have internal communications. So that's sort of the core of our marketing team. And we have both system level marketers for the entire Baptist Health system. And then we have marketers out in the field at each hospital or market location. So completely spread out all over the state and some in other states. And we work closely with a lot of the departments that you've mentioned. So we work closely with legal, with compliance, probably most closely with human resources. Those are large groups, so I'm not saying that they all have access to our dam, but like I said, we have a gatekeeper system. So sometimes individuals from those departments will have access to be part of the workflow. And sometimes one of our marketing team members is sort of a liaison between us and them using the dam. That's another nice thing, is that you can sort of, download PDFs right from the dam if they need to email someone who doesn't have direct access. But for those that are like super users or regular users, we try to get them kind of, set up and trained and part of the workflow if we're going to be working with them on a regular basis.
Awesome. So here's another one that just came in. What is the best practice for ensuring stakeholders sign off in a timely manner? We'll just open that up to I guess, anyone.
So I have found in experience putting this close to the users where it counts, right? So along the business process, make sure that these stakeholders who need to sign off are the right people, right? Meaning it's important to their role that they be involved. And then the system just facilitates it, right? And honestly, if you're looking back at your workflow, as I said, if you're looking at your analytics and you see this slice of approval is always taking us 2 weeks longer than we think it should, well then isolate it and find out why, right? What can you do about that? Look a step earlier in the process to see is something hanging it up. So, first keep the work next to or closest to the people who value from it. And second, use your analytics and use your information to continuously improve this too.
Eric, you had a slide up where you talked about governance, and we believe governance is not an option. We've seen enough systems where they didn't work because there was no governance behind it. So to follow on with what Derek was saying is, to the individual who asked the question and for everyone else on the call, make sure you have a good governance process behind the scenes to allow who is the important people that should be signing off. What are their names? Where are they? What time zone? Little things like that will help these things be efficient along the way. So governance is not an option. If you're not doing it on the call today, hopefully you can walk away today and say, I think we need to do some governance going forward. Andy, don't you think? I mean, that sounds important to you probably, right?
Oh, yeah. And one of the really nice things about IntelligenceBank, and they did not pay me to be here. We're here because we really, this is just such a great platform. When we first looked at other options, the cool thing about IntelligenceBank is like they have that workflow option. They have the database, the project database, and then of course the thing that all dams do, the asset management in that. But for us, as far as staying on time, so everything's tied together and everything's seamless. So we have our project request form on the dam. So when that's submitted, that gets a proof date and that gets a due date. And so then that's part of the database record. And so that in turn, when we load a project for review, it has the project number on there. So everyone can see when the proof date, when the due date is. I wanted to give a little tip of the hat or shout out to my team. I think a lot of them are here watching, but then as far as answering the question, for our team, our designers are usually the ones loading the projects, and they sort of manage that. They know the due dates because it's in the project request, and they can give a nudge if they need someone that's not responding. We don't have a lot of problem with that. Most people are, interested in getting their projects through, but sometimes, some projects hang out there, and but either the designers or RJ, who's on the call or on the Zoom as well. We're fortunate to, have him as a project traffic manager who will just kind of reach out and, looking at, we have a weekly meeting where we look at all these deadlines, and so we can reach out and give nudges where we need to. So
I think, the use of technology to make that approval a simple process helps eliminate this problem, right? If I get a request to go approve something and it's a super manual process and it's going to take me 15 or 20 minutes to do, that's a much different level of effort that I plan for and usually procrastinate on until I need to. Whereas if it's, a link that pulls me right into a platform and then I can quickly review something and click an approve button and it's a 3-minute exercise, right? I'm much more likely to let me knock that out. I got 3 minutes before my next meeting. So I think technology definitely also helps with that, with just the visibility and how quickly you can, show people that these approvals, take a lot less time. So we are getting close on time. I'd like to ask one more question, and I think this is, I'll throw this one over to Salt Flats, and we can quickly all pitch in. But how do you get started? And that's one of the questions that someone submitted here. Like, where do you start solving this problem?
It is the question of the day. How do you get started with all this stuff? Well, we sort of hinted at it earlier before, Eric, and whoever asked the good question. This really does go back to the philosophy of the people, the process, the technology, and the data, and looking at those things as one big sort of whole. It answers the questions of the who and the what and the when and the why and the where. How many assets do you have? Where are they? Who owns them? Who controls them? When do you need them to get in and when do you need to get it out? Why? Who's going to be approving them along the way? Who's going to be, saying, yes, let it go out the door? And Eric, I'll tip it off back to you a little bit. You sort of had one on your slide and you said, know your workflow. Derek and I have seen many instances where clients don't actually know the workflow. And that's a good thing. That's good. This is an opportunity to say, what is the workflow? How do assets get in? How are they getting out? And in that in-between stage, who's approving them? Who are the ones to get to make the decisions? That's some of the ways I think that we at Salt Flats can, get started. But there's more to that, Derek. What are some of the good starting points?
I'm a one-trick pony here. I start with value. So I'm going to walk in and I'm going to say, what is causing pain and creating errors or costing money right now? I'm going to look at the workflow and say, where from a review and approve process are things slowing down, or how are errors or problems getting out there into the market, and hone in on that and try to start there. Now, there's lots of other things to do in terms of governance, and you want to start with something simple, not something terribly complex. But I'm going to reach to the business and say, what's the most pain you have here, and how can we address it, right?
That's great. Well, I think that's a good place to sort of wrap up on. Really like to thank the attendees for joining, but also thank Salt Flats, Derek and John for your expertise and insight, and Andy, RJ, and the Baptist Health team for sharing a little bit about your experience with DAM and approval process. Thank you all. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.